Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Ashley Mailloux, taking a look at two stakes races at Del Mar on Saturday. The California Dreamin is the co-feature. Of course, the main event, the Grade 1 Clement L. Hirsch. But the California Dreamin's a nice betting race. Race number 9, mile and a 16th on the turf, Calbreds. Before we take a look at the field, remember to access those Timeform US past performances at DRF.com. Breakthrough PPs just got better. Pace ratings, class ratings, speed ratings, pace projectors, and lots more. Learn more at drf.com/TFUS101. Here's the field for the California Dreamin, mile and a 16th on the turf. Kings River Knight, your 9-5 morning line favorite. Ashley, this horse is very versatile. Good on dirt, good on turf.
He certainly is. And I think, looking at this one, has some early foot, but has also been able to close from off of it in the past. Not shocking to see him at 9-5 on the morning line. I felt like, Dan, looking at the field, a couple horses were going to try something new, whether that was, stretching out in distance or they're just trying to get back on track. So, I think 9-5 is probably the right price on him in general.
You make a very good point about how adaptable Kings River Knight is. As we throw up the Timeform US pace projector, he's expected to face a little bit more gas than the last time he raced on the turf, where he was able to get to a pretty easy lead. That Jimmy Blue Jeans, the number 7, is fast. Larry's Legend is pretty quick. You even have a horse on the far outside stretching out off some sprint races. The pace is expected to be fast, but Kings River Knight can sit, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and I think that's probably going to be where he wants to be in this race. You've mentioned some speed. Even Bally's Charm has been forwardly placed, but I don't know if he's necessarily as fast as someone such as Jimmy Blue Jeans. And looking at the Andy Mathis trainees there, we'll talk about a little bit later. The mile has been all right, but I wonder if a mile and a 16th may be a tad too far. So I think, a lot of things might play in the favor of Kings River Knight.
If the pace setters sort of knock themselves out, it could set things up for the 5, Carmelitas Man. Take a look at that LP flag. That indicates that he has the fastest late Timeform US pace rating. Let's start things off with the number 1, Royal and Rando, coming into this race off a slight layoff in a synthetic race. Ran into a pretty good field, though, last time out in that All-American on synthetic. The winner's a really nice horse, very versatile on any surface. Came back to place in a stake at Pleasanton on dirt with a 94 buyer.
Yeah, very versatile. Last year was a tremendous year, 6 for 13. This year, though, hasn't shown as much in those 2 starts. And you can see some big gaps between his races so far. So maybe they've been working through a couple things and trying to get him back to the races now, just making his second start since January. I have to think, though, looking at his, maybe even his last 4 or 5, facing a couple other runners in here, it's a tougher bunch.
The 2 is hacking it up, and this horse is lightly raced. I still think there's a bit of upside potential for this 3-year-old. He is going to have to face some salty older competition in this race. His most recent start was the Snow Chief on turf at Santa Anita. He finished behind a couple of next out winners. One of them would come back to win on dirt with a 76 buyer.
The race that I like is the 1-2 back. I know it was at Golden Gate, but I think in the Silky Sullivan, he raced very well, got a really good trip in that performance. And you look at the number, he's been able to kind of replicate those numbers at Santa Anita in the past, now taking his show to Del Mar for the first time. He's intriguing. I know the barn's not off to the best of starts at the meet, but the connections, they typically do fairly well.
Trader Peter Miller trying to shake things up aboard the 3, None Above the Law. Going to take the blinkers off in here. Now, this one chased our morning line favorite in vain. 2 starts back in the Crystal Water. Last time out, similar situation on dirt. I wonder if maybe the blinkers off is an indication they want to get this horse off the pace a bit.
I wonder too. I mean, looking at the last 2 efforts, it's been kind of pressing the pace just a couple of lengths off and just hasn't had any sort of late power in the stretch. And I'm also wondering if this was maybe rider feedback in the past. Joe Bravo's been aboard this horse. One of those efforts I thought was a pretty decent effort, albeit it was in a sprint race on the dirt. But I just wonder if those last couple of rides, even those riders, Ramon Vasquez or even Drayden Van Dyke, they've made comments to suggest, or even in the morning, whoever gets on this horse, looking at the stat for the barn blinkers off, it's a fairly good stat. But another one, we have similar kind of thoughts on a lot of these horses, is going to need to improve.
And this is a guy, though, that does have it in him. He won the Del Mar Derby a couple of years ago from off of the pace. So maybe Joe's going to take him back and try to make one run. He could offer a little bit of value. The 4 is Larry's Legend. This one going dirt to turf, sprint to route. The last time he was on turf was going 5/8, 2 starts back. Faced a couple of next out winners that day. Some questions he's going to have to answer, especially distance.
Distance is a big question. I think I could see him even being forwardly placed in this race, looking at some of those races at Golden Gate. Not saying he'll be on the lead, but I think he'd be pressing the pace, which could muddy things up front. But as you've said, you go down the page, he's got that one race back in January at a mile. He was an okay third, but the class is very different. $25,000 claimers, Santa Anita versus this bunch. I'm not sure. I don't know if I see the mile on a 16th.
We have the reigning California Dreamin champion here. That's the number 5, Carmelitas Man. And you can argue this one was a little bit pace compromised. Last time out in the Crystal Water, it was a race where Kings River Knight was able to control it. It was a short field. And we're going to see Carmelitas Man rally a bit for third. Just there wasn't a lot of closing going on. And the fact that he was able to pass a couple of horses in the stretch indicates to me that he's in sneaky form.
And it was a short field, right? I mean, he was dead last in a 5-horse field and is trying to make up grounds where Kings River Knight looked pretty much a winner from the top of the stretch, if not through most of the race. So I thought it was a good performance, and it certainly stepped up from those prior 2 efforts. And a mile and a 16th, maybe not even his preferred distance. With that sort of late close, we've seen a mile and an eighth. They actually tried him last year after he won this race, a mile and 3/8, and he was able to repeat. But looking at the California Dreaming last year, the pace wasn't necessarily hot and he was still able to close nicely. So just something to note.
And don't worry about this little bit of a layoff because it's basically the exact same layoff that
Mhm.
worked for him so well last year. Kings River Knights, the horse to beat. We just saw him beat Carmelitas Man on turf in the Crystal Water, and then he came right back at Los Alamitos. No turf there. Didn't bother him. He won the Bertrando in gate to wire fashion, and it looked like at the 3/16 pole, Ashley, that he's about to get swamped, and he fends everybody off.
Yeah, this was really impressive. And I know we're showing a race on dirt, but still that he's able to kind of dig in deep when he needs to here, I think says a lot about his ability in terms of his career so far, lightly raced for a 5-year-old with just those 10 starts under his belt. And it's been interesting to watch his last couple of races because he has found this new ability to leave the gate and kind of say goodbye to the rest of the field, where in the past they tried different things and he was also successful. So it makes you wonder what has gotten into him lately that he wants to be on the front end. But I think as a bettor, when you start to dissect this race, to know that, hey, if he's not on the front, he probably will be okay based on his past performances is not a bad thing.
Potential pace setters up next. That's the number 7, Jimmy Blue Jeans, who has been on the lead in his last 3 starts. And he was listed as a vet scratch on June the 11th. He's coming into this race off a little bit of a layoff, but he's been facing some pretty good competition. In his last race on turf, the 4th place finisher came back. He won his next 2 starts on dirt with buyers of 91 and 88. It's just that I think he's at his best when he gets a little bit of a lonely lead and a breather on the backstretch, and I'm not sure that's available to him here.
I agree. I mean, look at what happened last time at a Golden Gate. The opening half was quicker than its previous race. And when we, look at his efforts here, we're looking at that most recent race. They kind of took it to him a little bit early, and he is going to tire here. He's still game throughout. He's getting, lugging out a little bit off that rail, and he's going to get beat here. You look at the race 2 back. They went just over 49, almost 49 and 2 to the opening half, which is pretty slow. That kind of concerns me, where I agree with you too. Some horses, they get to the front when they're lonely out there, they do their best, and when they get the pressure, they're not able to withstand themselves and withstand their bid, and they do kind of crumble in the end. But I think it was also a positive sign here to see Kent DeSormo booked to ride.
Bally's Charm is up next. This is the number 8, and trainer Jeff Mullins is going to test this guy because it'll be his first start since October. So he's going to have to overcome a lengthy layoff. Now, the last time we saw Bally's Charm, we saw some good things against Open First Level Allowance Company going 9 furlongs. It was a race where he got up close to a solid pace. He opens up at just the right time and holds sway on the line. The 3rd place finisher of this race would come back. The 5th place finisher, pardon me, come back to run 3rd with an 88 buyer, then one with an 89. So Bally's Charm kept good company.
He's a very good 4-year-old from what we've seen so far. I mean, very consistent. And I do think, unlike others, he's going to try to be forwardly placed. Whether he's quick enough, though, to be out there, I think that's a whole different story. I liked this effort. It was going a mile and an eighth. I think the slight cutback to a mile and a 16th hits him at the right distance, just depending what happens up front. And Hector Barrios, what a meet he's having. He's done very well since, deciding to leave, say, South Florida and go out to California. I think it's a great sign to see him booked to ride.
The number 9, Bang for Your Buck, is another horse getting an equipment change. Blinkers off for the first time in his career, and you could argue he was a little bit compromised in the Crystal Water. It was that short field. He tried to rally from out of it. He just didn't do much, but gave an even performance. The race before that, also a throwout perhaps. It was raced on dirt. His race in the Turf Classic, I thought 3-back was okay because he was very aggressively handled that day, and I believe he can be more patiently ridden. Maybe a horse that can crack a single race exotic at a price.
It's interesting, blinkers off. So I'm curious to see kind of what the strategy will be. Typically, he's not really far off of it. And when you look at the California Dreaming last year, he ends up being second and he was forwardly placed. He had blinkers. So I'm curious about the equipment change. Maybe, they're trying to get him to relax more and kind of see his competition next to him. I know last time out we talked about he was compromised with the short field and didn't have a late kick, where I think the struggle that I have is someone like Carmelitas Man was able to close on that group. So when I try to stack bang for your buck against others, he's a little, I guess, lower on my list.
Plenty of back class for the 10 Indian Peak, who placed in this race in 2021. And one time he went sprinter out. He was very effective, third in the graded Seabiscuit handicap that season at Del Mar. So now he's going to try again the sprinter route move. And he was chasing some pretty fast fractions in his most recent start, the Daytona, going down the hill.
Not sure what to make of him at this distance, right? They have had those last three efforts all at 6.5 on the downhill. And you alluded to the fact in the past, he has done well from that sprint to route angle. And a lot of horses do. But my concern was the next time they tried it, it didn't work. They kept him routing again, and it didn't work again in the Wicker. And that was at Del Mar. And then he was sidelined. So maybe there are excuses for those performances. We do see those gaps in between the races. But in his last couple on the downhill, they've gone quick enough that he's been a couple of lengths off the pace, but hasn't been able to do much of anything from there. And actually, I think in some of them, he's fallen a little bit flat. If I looked at his efforts, I thought his first one off the layoff was probably his best.
Fun race, a lot of different ways to go. So we'll take a look at our top selections for the California Dreamin. You're going to go with Kings River Knight. I'm going to go with Kings River Knight. It's nice to know this horse has the versatility, not just from a surface standpoint, from a running style standpoint.
I thought it was key. It is a big field, and I think with horses that don't have the solid recent form that he does, it makes him stand out a little bit. But you also have a little bit more comfort, being comforted around the fact that he does have that versatility. So I'm not shocked to see we have the same horse on top here, Dan. I thought he kind of stood out in some ways.
You're going 6, 5, 8, and 10. I'm going to try to get none above the law into the exacta with the blinkers off, hoping they revert to those rating tactics and get the right race flow. I'll go 6, 3, 5, 7. It's the California Dreamin' on Saturday. It's Clement L. Hirsch Saturday. A nice card at Del Mar. Good luck.